Hello and welcome to the GVC. I am your host, Nash Kohlberg. Today we have a very exciting episode from South Dakota Magazine. We have Bernie, the founder, and Katie, the second generational owner. Thank you guys for coming on.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Bernie, take us back to day one, before this was even an idea. What made it become an idea, and what did that?
Well, I was in journalism. I'm the son of a farmer and a poet. My mom was a really good poet, good writer. And so I kind of we grew up with books. And my dad only had an 8th grade education. His dad died when he was in the 8th grade, and he went to work farming and raising the younger siblings. So he didn't have much of an education, but he was a voracious reader, read everything that he could. I think we subscribed to a couple daily papers, and I think Dad read every book that ever came in the house. So and Mom was a writer. So we grew up with that. In fact, we could get out of chores at our farm. We could actually get out of chores if we would go read a book. That was an incentive to read. So we grew up that way, and I found that I enjoyed writing in college, in high school and college. And when I got out of college, here at Mount Marty University in Yankton, I got a job in politics in Washington with a congressman from South Dakota, Frank Denholm. And I didn't care for Washington at all. It was so artificial. It was so far from where I grew up in rural Yankton County in Utica, South Dakota. It just seemed so artificial that I was anxious to come home. So I came home. He actually lost the election in 1974 to Larry Pressler. So I came home and got some newspapering jobs. I enjoyed that, but I found very quickly you could starve to death as a newspaper journalist in South Dakota in the 70s, and I'm afraid it's only gotten worse since then. So eventually I started my own little weekly newspaper and found that probably wasn't a great path to success either. And so I had a chance to sell that weekly newspaper, and I signed a no-compete to say I wouldn't be in the newspaper business in South Dakota for 10 years. I thought, that's fine. I thought I would take my little bit of money and go to Colorado or somewhere else and buy a bigger newspaper that you could actually support a family on. I had a couple of kids by then. So we couldn't find anywhere else we really enjoyed living. It sounds corny today, but I mean, we just didn't find any place that really felt like South Dakota, or especially like Yankton. So we were actually driving home from Colorado. My point of all this is that there's no method to it. We were driving home from Colorado. I was actually reading the no-compete, looking for a loophole, and it said newspapers. It didn't say magazines. So it was really that simple. There was no great study or brainstorm or anything. It's just that I needed to get back into journalism, and I don't have the face for TV or anything like that. So I called the people we'd sold the newspaper to, and they said, yeah, we should have put magazine in there, but we didn't. But they were cool about it, and that's how South Dakota Magazine got started.
And what did some of those first couple of years look like trying to get your feet on the ground? What kind of things did you do to get some momentum?
Well, I grew up on a farm with 7 boys, a small farm, and then I worked in the South Dakota newspaper business, so I was accustomed to poverty, and I didn't need much to live on. Sure. And Myrna probably disagreed somewhat, but I just didn't need much, and I was enjoying it a lot, and it was fine. It was a really slow start for the first couple of years.
Sure.
But it worked out.
Yeah. Katie, what do you remember about some of those first additions and stuff?
There was a lot of excitement in my family. I was in 1st grade, so I probably didn't understand exactly what was happening. But I do remember, for example, the first time I saw the magazine, or my brother came up running up to my school, up the steps of the school, and I was just getting out, and he was like, "Look, the magazine's here." And then it made a little bit more sense to me. But I remember, like, my big takeaway from that was like, why was I in school and my brother wasn't? So yeah, I was kind of young, but I do remember possibly. He's right. Like, I remember, didn't you have to sell cows at some point to like pay some bills? Because we had a small farm, and I remember maybe we had to sell some cows every once in a while because we had a printing bill and that kind of thing. Yeah. So it did start off really slow. But I remember we've had all kind of offices all over downtown Yankton, and I remember just the support from the community was always there. And we used to keep because I grew up with it. Now we have like computers and stuff, but back then we had a gal named Elma it was just Elma and my dad, and they had a file, like a plastic file cabinet about this big, and it had like post-it note or postcards in it, and that's how they kept track of the magazine subscriptions at that time. So having grown to where we are right now, it is fun to look back and reflect on it. So thanks for giving us that opportunity, because we're so busy we don't really just sit around and talk about these things.
What made you so passionate about the magazine business and what you do?
I really love magazines, and we subscribe to magazines from all over the country, and even sometimes get magazines from all over the world. And I just think it's a fascinating medium. I think it's just you can take it and make it into a piece of art, I think. And so that's kind of where I come from. I never really, when I was growing up, I never thought, oh, I'm going to work there. That's what I'm going to do. But I've always loved magazines. And it's so fun to be able to work in a place where you can tell stories and kind of create that art how you want to. Just come up with new ideas. There's like no limit to what we can do. And I feel like also we have such a great support system from all over the state, with working with great photographers, great writers, and our readers who just really love the magazine. So all that together is what makes me passionate about it. There's probably no one thing that, keeps us doing it. It's like a lot of different things together.
So today, you guys are a very visual magazine. Was that always the case, and how did you introduce that?
No, it really started out, I think, more as more the printed word was really the big deal. I love photography. I had a wonderful photography teacher at Mount Marty, John Day, who really one of South Dakota's leading artists and art educators. So I had a really great teacher, and I always liked photography. But really, in the 80s, when we started, magazines were less visual. There were a few exceptions, Look magazine and a few, but really most magazines were more the printed word, and it was just page after page of gray, and that's what the medium was. And we tried our best at photography, but it wasn't the priority. The priority was make every word count, and find those stories and tell those stories the very best you could tell them. Really, it was when Katie came back from college and decided she wanted to work here, and kind of took an assessment of the magazine, I think, and said, what can I do and how can I play a role? And it was really her goal to turn it into more of a visual medium.
Yeah. Touch on that.
Yeah, it was so I started at the magazine in the early 2000s, and photography was changing a lot then, and printing was. So we were kind of moving to digital. Like, I think when I was there, we bought our first digital camera. And so before that, getting photos in the magazine was a lot harder too. They had to do like color separations and pay for color printing, for example, on certain pages. So color printing was available, but you had to like really plan out the magazine. Like, I want this page to be color, but this page isn't. And like color ads cost more than non-color ads at that point. Now I think black and white ads should cost more than color ads, because anyway, that's a whole other subject.
It's a good subject. But.
Yeah, the whole. But yeah, so we were just switching to digital photography, and it was. And cameras now are amazing, but back when the first digital cameras, for the time they were amazing, but even like that color, the color they produced was not that great. The printing wasn't that great, but we just knew we had to move in that direction, and so we just got started with that with the digital photography, and they kind of collided at the same point, where printing at the same time became, we could print color on every page, which was amazing. And I remember my dad said, okay, I want every photo in the magazine to be a really good photo. Like, and that just wasn't the case. If you go do a story on, I don't know, a family farm or something, I can't think of an example, but if you go do a story on that, the writer sometimes just gets a snapshot. Oh, I'm going to get a snapshot of the farmer and his wife or something, for example. And, to go along, because like my dad said, it was all storytelling at that point. And people wanted that. And so we didn't have great photos. Sometimes we just took what we could get, because we were still, going to Herald's to get these photos produced, and it wasn't an easy process. So yeah, so I started at a pretty exciting time, I would say. And slowly we just built built relationships with photographers across the state, and I still work with almost all of them, which is amazing. And I think at that point, when I started, I can't remember how many readers we had, but we had enough readers where I think photographers were interested in working with me. So, it wasn't on me. Or obviously it wasn't on me, but they wanted, they knew about the magazine already. And I think they were up for the task to help us make it a really beautiful magazine. They appreciated what we were trying to do and wanted to be a part of it. And then of course now fast forward, we're in times even, and then I would say another transitional time where I think so back when my dad started the magazine, all text magazine would have been okay. Nowadays, I think, we need to even move more in the direction of visual storytelling, kind of creating a world on the page. And I think that's how we're going to kind of keep on grabbing people's attention for the future as well.
So yeah, today you guys mesh the visual storytelling and the print storytelling. Why is storytelling so important to you guys?
Well, when I started the magazine, I just thought stories were entertainment, and it's something you could hook readers with, and then if they'd write you a check every year, you could feed the cows and you could raise the kids, and it was just a product. Stories are so much more than that. Stories are really critical to the whole human experience, and our readers actually taught us this. I just thought I'll tell a good story and you'll subscribe and we're all happy. But the readers, even in the early years when we didn't have that many readers, they would write or call or stop or sometimes drive an hour or two out of their way to come see us and tell us how those stories really changed their lives. And mostly it taught them who they were as South Dakotans. It helped them understand who they were and what their place is all about. And it was just life-changing for some people. It almost would sound corny, but I remember a lady who moved home in our very early years. She read the magazine for a couple of years, moved home, and moved to Menno, and then she came and told us, well, you have to help me find a job now because I moved here because of your stories. That's a true enough story. And I know parents who got to subscribe to the magazine for their kids, hoping they would keep them homesick, so they would come home, and there was this whole mix of things, like that. But really, the stories just helped them understand who they were, what their place was all about, and that gave a deeper meaning to their lives. And that's not a thing you can put on a magazine subscription card. It's not a good saleable point, but it's really what it's all about, is helping people understand who they are and what their place is really all about.
What makes storytelling so powerful?
I think what makes the storytelling in South Dakota Magazine so powerful is that we can give South Dakotans, we can give our readers a sense of place and a sense of pride in South Dakota. And, a lot of the people who originally started reading the magazine 40 years ago, by the way, we didn't mention it's our 40th anniversary, I guess. They were really hardworking. That's 40 years ago. They're really hardworking people. They probably didn't have a lot of time to sit around and reflect on life in South Dakota and what it means. And then, so we started the magazine 40 years ago, just started collecting these stories of, real, authentic South Dakotans. And I think that's the most important thing that probably we've done is create pride in South Dakota. Telling people, hey, our culture is really cool. We have our own culture. We're different. And these stories together tell us why we're different. And I really love that aspect about what we do. And I don't know, I think that's probably why, we're still around today, 40 years later.
So many questions from that response. The first one, how do you guys find those stories, those true South Dakota stories? How do you find those?
I would say that's probably one of the most common questions people ask us. They're always like, wow, you're going to run out of story ideas. And that's just never, ever going to happen. We get a lot of, our readers give us story ideas. There's so many cool people doing so many cool things, and that's kind of what we want to, people are never going to stop doing cool things, and we're going to be there to tell our story, I guess. But do you have a?
No, we could walk out of here and go 4 directions and find a story in every direction within a block or two. The challenge is to do the stories well, because the stories deserve to be told well. and honestly, and to find the time and the talent to do them in a way that really respects the story.
Yeah, that's so true because the story idea is never the problem. Yeah, it's really like what our envision, like how we envision it turning out, how we envision it coming out in the magazine, and we really, want to touch people's heartstrings with the magazine too. So that's another part of it. We try to get stories that not only entertain but that do resonate with people.
Yeah, and it is, your 40th year, so congrats. And you said it's just the beginning, right? Why are you so excited about the future?
Well, you kind of have to be, right? Like we're always looking for tomorrow, and I don't have cows, but we still have a lot of bills to pay. So no, I am really excited about the future. I don't know. I just feel like, first of all, a lot of print publications, newspapers and magazines are failing these days. I kind of take that on as more of a challenge, but also I feel like South Dakota is such a tight-knit community. I'm just really optimistic always that we can not only not go out of business, but grow our business. We just have to get out and ask people, and they say yes. But it's exciting too because I feel like that it's just a chance for us to get even better and better, kind of. Like when I look at the magazine, I'm looking at one over here. I should be staring at that. You should be holding that. When I think about it, I just think, what can we do that's like really cool, that's going to catch people's attention? I don't know. It's kind of just like a fun game. That's how I look at it. But do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, it's heartbreaking. I think I love print journalism, and I recognize that some people think it's a dinosaur, and apparently the daily newspaper and even the weeklies are struggling. And it's really sad for me to see that. I think it's really hurting our communities not to have that. But I'm still pretty optimistic. I'm not saying the medium won't ever change, but I'm still pretty optimistic about print journalism when you do it in a good, honest, meaningful way. I really think the internet has not been the death knell of community journalism, which is kind of what we do. I mean, South Dakota is one big community. We are kind of the community newspaper, but it's sad. I mean, we're now the large. I think we probably have more subscribers than the top 3 or 4 daily newspapers in the state. I mean, they've lost so many. We've gained and they've lost, and it's sad for the state. But I really think with leadership like Katie's and the great staff we have and that South Dakota community that is so close knit as Katie talked about, I think South Dakota Magazine can continue to thrive. And I almost compare it to like a cheeseburger. You can get all the nutrients of a cheeseburger in a pill, but people still order cheeseburgers. They want the bun and the ketchup and all that, right? It's an experience, and if we can keep making the magazine an enjoyable experience where they pick it up and it really warms their heart or helps them understand better who they are and who South Dakota is, or what South Dakota is. I think that's still something that appeals to people.
Well, that's a great answer. I can tell you guys kind of mentioned, each other's leadership, and I can tell you guys are a great team. Behind the scenes, how is it to run a family-run business, a multi-generation? Is it all, sunshine and rainbows, or is there challenges, or how do you navigate some of that?
Oh, I wish that I had like some really dramatic story to tell you, but I don't. I mean, we get along pretty good. Yeah, I think we just work really good together, and obviously I really value his input in all areas, and we have a wonderful staff at the magazine that we're so proud of on top of it. So yeah, there's not a lot of drama in that area.
No, it's a good question. I grew up on a farm, and I've seen how 2 and 3 generation farm families sometimes operate pretty well, but oftentimes there's a lot of stress and struggles. So I grew up. In fact, I was always been kind of interested in that, because as you get around South Dakota doing stories on towns and communities, you oftentimes run into business leaders who sometimes it's a 2nd or 3rd or 4th generation business, and you see some that succeed so well, and then others that don't. And I've often thought if we could just find a way to help these, even if it's not within the family transition, if we could find a way to transition some of these really pretty cool businesses across the state, we could really do a lot of good economic development, a lot of good community development. Yeah. Somehow that's just something that it doesn't seem like the policymakers have been very interested in. They certainly haven't committed many resources to it. I think you do find people at University of South Dakota and at some of our business schools who have an interest in it, recognize the need, but maybe don't have the answers. So it's a fascinating question, actually, something we see as we work on stories in towns and communities. And there's no easy answer, but it's really important to our state.
Yeah. Would there be one or two things that you think have maybe helped you guys run so well together?
Well, Katie's pretty easy to get along with. And I think we share the same vision, don't you? I know
Yeah.
we very much share the same vision. And I think we've always taken the long view of the business. We've tried not to worry about the short term, even in the early years when Katie was small and we were struggling. I mean, I don't think there was never, ever a day when I thought, we should quit this and do something else. Because I think we were doing something we thought was meaningful, that we enjoyed doing, and it was meaningful and important to the community and the state. So there was never a day like, well, maybe I should quit this and go do that or any of that. So I think, and I see the same in Katie. I mean, we just take the long view that, now we got the internet and all these changes and everything, but it doesn't mean we can't figure this out and figure out a new way to move forward.
I think so. I mean, I think that I've been really lucky, obviously, to have my dad kind of mentor me. But at the same time, like, I feel other small business people, I have a feeling that it's like it's really lonely for them. Like, if it's not a family business, or if you don't have that support, I feel like it can get lonely because there are ups and downs, with employees, with, getting bills paid, all that stuff. It's a lot of pressure for small business people. And I think that that's probably the fact that it is a family business is one of the reasons it's probably lasted so long. Because at a certain point, I probably helped you out too, like before I took over and bought it. And,
Absolutely.
because you just have someone else if you have troubles to talk to them about it, but also maybe to remind you, like, oh, hey, lighten up. Like this, no one's going to die if you don't get that done today, or if you don't get that bill paid, like, just to keep things in perspective.
Yeah. One thing that I'm very curious about is different magazines and print have different business models. What is your guys' business model, and why'd you choose that?
Well, in the early days, our business model very much was to go out and be a subscriber supported magazine, and back then advertising was pretty hard to come by. I think even if you had, there was so much competition for advertising. I mean, all the daily newspapers were really, chucking and jiving and doing really well, and radio stations at every corner and TV, and there was so much media that advertising was tough to come by, and especially for a small magazine. So I think we realized pretty quickly that we needed support from subscribers, and now today that's our biggest strength. Is that now we have a lot of advertising. We appreciate every one of them, but we have a lot of advertising now, sometimes to the point where we have a hard time fitting them in the magazine. But that core base of support from readers is so important financially, but it also makes us responsive to the readers. It's more than just a financial support. It's like a partnership, and the readers are really. You can be corny, I guess, but you could say that the magazine really does belong to the readers. Because there's without them, we're gone in no time at all. So that I think it's that core group of reader support that really sets us apart from a lot of magazines today. And even in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, some of the really big magazines across the country would give away subscriptions just to get readers so they could sell ads, and they really were after the ads, not the readers. And we've always been so responsive and so connected to the readers. That's been a big thing.
Yeah. If you were to maybe give a piece of advice to somebody else who's maybe passionate about print and magazine, what would you tell them?
I think I would tell somebody who's passionate about print and magazines in this day and age, I would encourage them, because kind of like what we've talked about, I don't think that print is dead. I think that I do stand by what I said, that it's an exciting time to be in print. And, with artificial intelligence and things like that, I just think all of that gives like writers a chance to shine even more. because people can sniff out, pretty easily, kind of like anything that's fake or not genuine or not authentic. People are looking for that experience, and that's what we can offer now. And the more kind of crap that's out there, like artificial intelligence, writing, that kind of thing, the more what we do is so valuable. And so I would encourage them to stick with it, not get discouraged by kind of, all the factors that could discourage someone nowadays with AI and the internet. And then a second piece is like, okay, that being said, work really hard to be entertaining, to be different, to produce something that no one else is producing, because that's what we have to do in this day and age.
This is maybe on a little different note. You have mentioned South Dakota pride, and that you guys are so huge on that. If you were each to describe South Dakota in 3 words, which ones would you pick?
I'd say kind, independent, and lovers of the outdoors and nature.
We'll count it. They're for sure independent, authentic. Yeah, South Dakotans are different. Yeah.
And every state is different. That's not something people might think, well, in today's world, Iowa's the same as Minnesota, and Minnesota's the same as South Dakota. And it's really not the case. For a few years, we published Nebraska Magazine. A friend of ours was publishing it in Omaha and struggling, and his wife got sick, and long story. But just for the love of the magazine industry, we took it over and kept it alive, and then eventually found a Cornhusker fan to be the publisher, and we sold it to one of our staffers. But in the 7 or 8 years that we ran it, very clearly, just right across the border. We're sitting here 100 yards from Nebraska. It's a different state, and we've never taken the idea, not that it's better or worse, but it's just different. I could talk about the way we promote tourism and the way they promote tourism. The 9 Indian reservations give such a flavor to South Dakota and such a history. Some of it sad, some of it powerful, some of it really beautiful. The Indian reservations, our citizen legislature is so different. It's like nothing anybody else really has. The rivers, and having the amazing Missouri River just cut right through the middle of the state and kind of divide it. And tens of thousands of years ago, a glacier slid through there and flattened the East River and left the mountainous West River, and all that geography, all those things, all taken all together. No one thing, but all those things taken together are like patches on a quilt. It's no single stitch that makes that quilt, but all those things stitched together make our quilt, our culture different than any other of the 50 states. And again, we've always worked really hard not to compare, not to say we're better or kinder or more independent or anything, but we are different in really beautiful ways, sometimes in tough ways. That we. I think of some of the history of the dating back to Wounded Knee and the struggles in the farm community in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and then on into the 50s. All those things have really just shaped our soul in South Dakota and made us who we are.
When you talk about the South Dakota quilt, what makes up South Dakota? Throughout the 40 years, are there 1 or 2 stories that come to top of mind right away that you're like, man, that was South Dakota, powerful?
There's one really sweet story I like about you can edit it out if it's too long, but there's a really sweet story that starts in Mississippi.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Sidney Milburn, this black child born in Mississippi in I think probably in the 40s, and he was really bright. He stayed in school. The teachers saw that sparkle in his eye that got him to grade school, got him into high school, and then he was so bright they had to get him into college. He wanted to be a veterinarian, so they got him into a vet school. And meanwhile, he got married, had a little boy, and he got a veterinary degree. And he wanted to escape. Now we're in the 50s or late 50s, I think, in the height of the civil unrest in the South, especially in Mississippi. So he wanted to escape that. And he realized there was fewer cows per veterinarian in South Dakota than anywhere else. So he thought South Dakota would be a good place to go. He didn't realize South Dakotans never call a vet until the cow is almost dead. That's why that was. So anyway, but he comes sight unseen to Elk Point, South Dakota, and sets up, hangs out his shingle as a vet. He had no idea he would be the only black family, anywhere around, and business was really slow, and nobody called, and he even had a hard time renting a house. And every night he said he and his wife would talk about, maybe this isn't a good idea. Maybe we should move back down south, and is this ever going to work out? And then a little boy had a pet raccoon with a broken leg, so he came to the vet, and the vet fixed the leg, and that got in the newspaper. And then a dairy farmer called with a sick cow. He called the vet, so the vet went out at night and worked on the cow, and of course the cow died because he hadn't called soon enough. And at that point, the South Dakota farmer gives the black vet, or the black vet pulls out his billfold and gives the South Dakota farmer, $20 or $30. And Sidney says, "Well, what's this for?" And I'm messing the story up. Sidney Milburn, the black vet, gives the farmer $20, and the farmer says, "What's this for?" And Sidney says, "Well, where I was raised and educated, if you lose a cow for a white farmer, you got to pay the cost of the cow." And the farmer said, "Well," he said, "go to hell. It ain't that way in South Dakota." And he gave him back his money. He paid him, probably not enough, but he paid him. And Sidney went home to his wife, Milburn, Corrine, and said, "We're staying right here in South Dakota." and they did. And in no time at all, he had a thriving business. He became a leader of the veterinary community in South Dakota. And when he died a few years back, they had to have the funeral in the school gymnasium because there were so many people. So I think it's funny how often race enters into so many of the stories in South Dakota. We think we're such a homogenous, state, but race enters into so many of the stories we do, and especially to some of the really powerful stories that oftentimes are going to be about race. It's something you wouldn't, and ethnicity, something you wouldn't really expect, I guess, but it's very true.
Where do you guys publish South Dakota Magazine?
So almost from the start, we bought an old house. It's all we could afford at the time. We bought an old house at the far east end of Yankton's Main Street, 3rd Street, and it was built by a territorial governor in 1875. Yankton was the territorial capital, and he was like the 7th governor. All the governors came here and built a house, but they mostly were Southern carpetbaggers at the time. Governors were appointed by the presidents, and they would come out here. Usually they were so crooked that they didn't. In 2 years, they were so unpopular that the president would then appoint another governor. So they turned over almost every 2 years. But they all came and built a house, a mansion, because there wasn't much here in Yankton. And they didn't build the houses to northern standards today. They didn't build foundations, so the houses didn't last. The house we're in was built by John Pennington, who was actually, I think he probably wasn't the most honest guy in America, but he was better than most. He actually got reappointed, which was a big deal. And he actually stayed here after his term ended. And he was told at the train station that if you're going to build a house, you've got to build a big foundation. He met a guy from Quebec at the train station who explained this to him. So he built with big rock foundations, and it's the only territorial governor's house that survived in Yankton. And it's made a pretty good office for us. We've a couple times through the years, we've looked at maybe moving into something more modern or for whatever reason. But every time we do it, we look around town and you just don't have the charm. Maybe it's got big round windows and it's nothing but more brick than you could ever afford today. And it's just, it's an 1875 governor's house.
Yeah, cool. Speak a little bit too on you're very passionate about Yankton, the community you're in, and just communities in general. But you've actually invested in other ways in Yankton as well. Explain that.
Yeah, well, the Hunhoff family, we're involved in a lot of business things around town. I grew up, as I said, with the 7 boys on a farm, and Dad was a pretty small farmer. He got a slow start because his dad died, and he wasn't out buying land when everybody else was. He was just trying to keep the one farm together. So we didn't grow up with a lot of land, and I think we all loved the farm. We would all there'd be 7 farmers out of Utica named Hunhoff if Dad could have got us started, but it wasn't possible. So we all kind of came into town, and most of my brothers and I started businesses. One brother is a tractor dealer. Another brother had a kind of a lawn and garden shop, and now he just started a wellness center. So we've been pretty entrepreneurial, and I think I think it fits the small farm culture that we grew out of. You just kind of find something you like to do and just dig in and make it work. Yeah. And so today we've got the magazine. Our son has the boathouse. That's an axe throwing bar and kind of a musical entertainment bar downtown. And then a couple of years ago, Katie should talk about this, but it was really Katie's dream that Yankton needed a coffee shop, a gathering place where people could really come together and have community engagement. But she should tell you about the coffee shop.
Well, yeah, Yankton, I grew up in Yankton and I went to college in Minneapolis at the University of Minnesota. And that was my first experience with a coffee shop. I just thought they were the most amazing places ever. Because, growing up in Yankton, we didn't have anything like that.
Daylight donuts.
I mean, people could go to bars and hang out. Not me, because I was obviously underage at that time. But bars were about the only place you could kind of like just hang out with your friends. Anyway, so I went to college. I loved coffee shops. And so it was kind of just in the back of my mind always, like, I'd see a building downtown and be like, oh, that would be a cool coffee shop. Well, then about 4 years ago, things just kind of felt right. And we started Muddy Mo's. And at the time, since then, there's been some really great coffee shops in Yankton. None of them still exist today. So when we opened, we were kind of the only coffee house. There's other fantastic coffee options, but now we're the kind of only coffee house. And I'd say still, it's maybe like, it's not a bar, but it's a place people come to study, see their friends, talk, and then we bring some of the magazine into it. We've had a lot of author signings, musicians, other local, kind of like featuring other local businesses. Like recently, we just had a mushroom night where some really cool guys in town started their own mushroom business. Growing really beautiful mushrooms. And so they came in and sold their mushrooms, and we gave out mushroom samples, and it was a lot of fun. Anyway, so I just always loved coffee shops, and it seemed like a really good fit for the magazine too.
Filling a need for the community and kind of meshing well with your business. That's awesome.
It's not so different from, Katie and I have talked about this. It's not so different from, it would seem like two totally different businesses, but it's really not. I mean, in both instances, you're kind of, finding your community and trying to, support and create community. In fact, after Katie did that, for some reason, I got to Googling coffee shops and magazines. I don't know why. And if you Google the two, and you'll see that they kind of grew up together in the 17th century in London, where writers started to gather just to share ideas, and then others would come to find out from the writers what was going on, and then they started selling some coffee to make a little bit of money, or a book or a coffee or whatever. And the two industries actually kind of grew up together, and it makes sense to us today because they're both about community.
Lastly, on more of a fun note, some quick questions. What are your guys' favorite South Dakota activities?
I just love the small towns and the small town festivals. One coming up right now, Dalesburg, over in Clay County, north of Vermilion, the little Dalesburg Festival, because it's not some big fake fancy thing. It's just a sweet little community event. So I'd say little small town festivals. They don't get too big.
I'm going to say hanging out at Terry Peak, watching my son ski, and sometimes I go on the Bunny Hill. But I just love that aspect of the culture. I've always been kind of interested in winter activities, like things that can make winter here more fun. And so my son got into skiing, and so I love Terry Peak. I love sipping hot chocolate and sitting in the lodge. That's a really hard question. One of my favorite covers is one of snow shovels, and no one would ever choose this cover. But do you remember that photo you took of snow shovels? My dad was taken off for Pierre because he was in the legislature, and I told him not to go because I'm always worried. I'm like a nervous Nelly about South Dakota roads in the winter, and he started driving, but luckily he came to his senses and he stopped in Freeman. And then,
I think the road was closed. I couldn't go any further.
Anyway, so he stopped in Freeman, but of course he wasn't and he got a hotel room, but he wasn't going to just like watch TV like a normal person. He went walking around and took photos, and he got this photo. I just liked it. It was like snow shovels. and there was like outside a downtown business, I think, and then there was some snowdrifts in front of it, and I just liked it because I was like, okay, whoever had that snow shovel just like gave up completely, and because there's all these snowdrifts everywhere. But anyway, go on. What's your favorite?
I can tell you our reader's least favorite cover was we put at one time John Green from Madison, the great artist from Madison. For a while, we were having him illustrate covers for us, and we had a story on rattlesnakes and the ecosystem of rattlesnakes and how they're not maybe altogether bad. And we thought John could do a painting of a rattlesnake with an olive branch in his mouth, as making peace with us. And the readers hated it. I had no idea how many people have snake phobias. And no, we got a lot of really, people canceled their subscriptions. People threatened to cancel their subscriptions. Some people sent them back. Several people tore it up in little pieces and sent it back to us. And the letters to the editor just never stopped. And so we quickly learned why most magazines put pretty girls on the cover and not rattlesnakes. So there will not be another rattlesnake cover.
That is a good answer. Lastly, if South Dakota Magazine was a TV show, what would you call it?
I'd say Live with Katie.
I had never thought about that before in my life.
You know, when we started the magazine, I had all these cool names that I thought we could name the magazine, but I quickly realized, you know, people aren't going to identify with that name. They're not going to know exactly what it is, and so we went with the real simple name that's not the flashiest, but it very clearly says what we're about. And it was a really good business decision, I think, because even with that name, people are a little confused about what are you doing. I mean, honestly, some people said, "What's that going to be out?" I had that question so much. I used to say, "Well, it'll be about Nebraska," you know. So even with that very specific name, so probably a business lesson there. I mean, you can go with the really cute, flashy name, but maybe you should stick with a name that really describes what you're all about.
So mine would be South Dakota Magazine, TV show. Yeah.
Perfect. I think that's a perfect way to end. We want to thank Bernie and Katie for coming on and sharing all their insight and history about South Dakota Magazine. If you want to get connected more, we'll have their information in the description below. And we want to thank you guys.
Thank you. We appreciate it.